The first thing Victor Reyes noticed was the smell, metallic and sweet, like copper pennies soaked in syrup. It crept through the maintenance shaft where he was elbow-deep in the guts of Haven Station's primary air scrubber. The scent was subtle, almost pleasant, if you didn't know better. Victor knew better. His hands continued working methodically, muscle memory taking over, while his mind cataloged the intrusion. The station's environmental monitors should have detected any foreign particles. The fact that they hadn't meant someone had bypassed safety protocols, or the system itself had been compromised. Through the mesh floor, grating beneath his boots, Victor could see into the habitat ring below. A woman stumbled against a wall, her face contorted in panic. A security officer drew his stunner, spinning wildly as if surrounded by invisible assailants. Within seconds, both collapsed to their knees, then fetal positions, trembling violently. Victor's breath quickened, but not from fear. His cybernetic respiratory implant, a souvenir from military service and the Battle of Ceres, clicked softly as it adjusted to the changing atmospheric composition. The augmentation had been experimental, designed to filter battlefield toxins. The military doctors never imagined it would save him from something like this. He sealed the maintenance panel and tightened his tool belt. The station schematics flashed across his mind, a blueprint memorized during countless overnight shifts. If the contaminant was airborne and spreading through the ventilation system, he'd need to reach environmental control on level 5. But first, survivors. As Victor descended the emergency ladder to the habitat level, the scene that greeted him confirmed his suspicions. Dozens of Haven's personnel lay scattered across the polished floor of the main concourse. Some whimpered, others screamed. All were trapped in personal nightmares, visible only to them. Medical alarms blared uselessly. The automated response drones hovered, confused by the scale of the emergency. A flash of movement caught his eye. A figure in the distinctive robes of the Zalavian delegation that had arrived just this morning. The alien moved with purpose, examining fallen humans with clinical detachment, taking readings with a handheld device. When it noticed Victor standing unaffected, the being's compound eyes widened. It touched a communication device on its thorax and spoke rapidly in its clicking language before retreating down a side corridor. Victor's jaw tightened. This was no accident. This was an attack. He knelt beside the nearest victim, a young technician from hydroponics. The man's eyes were dilated to black pools, his skin clammy. "Can you hear me?" Victor asked, keeping his voice level. The technician screamed and batted at invisible threats. Victor recognized the symptoms: acute terror response, hallucinations, dissociation. He'd seen similar reactions in soldiers exposed to neurochemical weapons during the Martian conflict. Those weapons had been banned by the Interstellar Accords. The comms on his wrist beeped. He activated it with a tap. "Victor, are you there?" The voice belonged to Dr. Mira Solis, the station's chief medical officer. Her words were punctuated by ragged breathing. "I'm here. Are you secure?" Med Bay. Sealed it when the alarms. Some kind of toxin. Her voice trembled. "My staff is incapacitated. I've administered sedatives to those I could reach, but I'm running out." "Stay put. I'm coming to you." "Victor, wait. The Zalavians, they're behind this. I saw them release canisters before the symptoms started. I've been analyzing air samples. It's some kind of targeted neurochemical agent. It's triggering the amygdala, flooding the system with fear responses. Why aren't you affected?" Victor glanced down at his chest where, beneath his uniform, the scar tissue surrounding his implant itched suddenly. "Lucky, I guess. How do we neutralize it?" "The station's air scrubbers should eventually filter it, but that could take hours. We need to manually override and increase filtration rate. And, Victor, people could die from this. Heart attacks, stroke, self-harm and panic. We need to distribute tranquilizers station-wide." "Copy that." "And Victor, Be careful. The security systems have gone haywire. The bots are identifying panicked personnel as threats, as if summoned by her warning. A security drone rounded the corner, its red targeting laser sweeping the corridor. Victor pressed himself against the wall as it scanned the fallen technician, then marked him as a threat due to his erratic movements. The drone's stun capacitors began charging with a high-pitched whine. Victor calculated angles, timing. Before the drone could discharge, he launched himself forward, catching it from below. His fingers found the manual override port and jammed his multi-tool inside, twisting sharply. The drone shuddered and went dark. One down. According to station protocols, there would be at least 20 more patrolling during a security event. Victor moved quickly through the corridors, staying close to the walls, avoiding the main thoroughfares where drones would concentrate. Along the way, he encountered more victims, station personnel contorted in various states of terror. Some clawed at their own skin, others huddled in corners, weeping. The worst were those who had harmed themselves trying to escape imagined horrors. For each, Victor could spare only moments, moving them to recovery positions, ensuring clear airways, continuing his push toward medical. His wristcom crackled again. "Victor!" A new voice, rasping with strain. "This is Lieutenant Cade, security." Victor paused. Cade was the newly appointed security chief who had regarded Victor with suspicion since arriving 2 months ago. The lieutenant had reviewed Victor's service record, including the incident that had led to his discharge and assignment to Haven, and clearly found him wanting. "Go ahead, Lieutenant." "I'm in the security hub. Most of my team is down. Station Director Reisner is... God." He tore out his own eyes. He thought. Cade's voice broke. "I've locked myself in the weapons locker. Whatever this is, it's affecting me too, but slower. I'm fighting it. Hold position. I'm heading to medical first, then environmental control. We need to clear this toxin and distribute sedatives." "No!" Cade's voice sharpened. "The aliens. They're in environmental control. I saw them on the monitors before they cut the feeds. 6 of them, armed. You can't go alone." Victor considered this new information. "What about external communications? Have you alerted Sector Command?" "Tried. They've jammed all outgoing signals. We're on our own. Reyes." "Not for long," Victor said. "I'm coming to you first. We'll arm up, then hit medical, then environmental. I don't know if I can hold out. The fear, it's getting worse. I keep seeing the massacre on Ganymede. I wasn't even there, but I can see it, smell it." Cade's breathing grew more erratic. "Focus, Lieutenant. That's not real. Count backward from 100 by sevens. Keep your mind occupied with complex tasks. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Victor ended the communication and quickened his pace. The security hub was 2 levels up, in the station's command sector. The most direct route would be the central elevator bank, but those would be either locked down or dangerous to use during an emergency. The maintenance shafts would be slower but safer. He was halfway to the nearest access point when a figure staggered from a side corridor, colliding with him. Victor reacted instantly, pivoting to pin the potential threat against the wall, then froze. "Mira?" Dr. Mira Solis stared at him with glassy eyes, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Victor, is that really you? How do I know it's really you?" Her voice pitched higher with each question. "You're experiencing paranoid hallucinations from the toxin," he said calmly, maintaining his grip on her shoulders. "Focus on my voice. I'm real. This is real." She shook her head violently. No, they said you would come. They showed me what you really are underneath." "Who showed you? The Zalavians?" He kept his voice steady, despite the urgency building within him. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Yes. They came to medical. Said they wanted to observe our neurological responses. I thought they meant brain scans. But then they released the gas, and everyone started screaming. "How did you get out of medical? You said you had sealed it." Her expression crumpled. "They overrode the locks. I ran. I abandoned my patients. I abandoned them." She began to sob, her body shaking with the force of her guilt. Victor made a quick decision. He couldn't leave her in this state, but he couldn't bring her with him to confront potentially armed hostiles either. "Listen to me, Mira. I need you to focus." He took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "The maintenance shaft behind that panel leads to the hydroponics level. The plants filter the air naturally. The concentration of toxin will be lower there. Can you make it?" She nodded weakly. "Good. Go there. Find a secure location. And wait. I'm going to fix this." He released her and retrieved a small sedative injector from her lab coat pocket. "Take this with you. Use it if the hallucinations get worse." As she stumbled toward the maintenance access, Victor continued toward the security hub with renewed urgency. The Zalavians had moved faster than he anticipated, already securing key areas of the station. Their interest in neurological responses suggested this wasn't simply an attack. It was an experiment. The entire station population had become unwilling test subjects. The question was, why? Zalavia had maintained peaceful, if distant, relations with human colonies for decades. This brazen attack would mean war if discovered, unless they never intended for anyone to discover what had happened here. Victor felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. Haven Station was remote, positioned at the edge of explored space to study astronomical anomalies. The perfect isolated laboratory, and potentially, the perfect disappearing act. When he reached the security level, the scene was one of devastation. The secure doors had been breached, not by force but with authorized access codes. Inside, security personnel lay scattered, some still twitching, others ominously still. Victor checked pulses as he moved through the room. Most were alive, though one officer had apparently shot himself with his own sidearm. The weapons locker was sealed at the far end of the hub. Victor approached cautiously, noting the trembling hand of a stunner emerging from the partially open door. "Lieutenant Cade, it's Reyes. I'm approaching." The weapon wavered, then lowered slightly. "Prove it's you. Tell me something only Reyes would know." Victor sighed. 3 weeks ago, you accessed my personnel file and spent 6 hours reviewing the incident on Europa. You think I don't deserve to be here? You may be right." The door opened wider, revealing Cade's haggard face. The lieutenant was young, too young for his position. Victor had always thought, but now looked decades older, his features drawn with strain. "How are you not affected?" Cade demanded, the stunner still loosely aimed in Victor's direction. "I am," Victor lied. "I'm just better at hiding it. Military training." He nodded toward the weapons rack behind Cade. "We need to gear up. The Zalavians have taken environmental control. They're using us as lab rats." Cade's hand tightened on his weapon. "How do I know you're not working with them? You're too calm. Everyone else is losing their minds. But you're just fine." Victor recognized the paranoia talking, but couldn't afford to waste time with reassurances. In one fluid motion, he stepped forward, disarmed the lieutenant, and pinned him against the rack. "I'm trying to save this station, Cade. Either help me or stay out of my way." Cade struggled briefly, then went limp. "I'm seeing things. Horrible things. My family dying. The station exploding. I can't tell what's real anymore." Victor released him and began selecting weapons from the rack. A stunner for himself, restraints, and a riot shield that might provide protection against whatever the Zalavians were armed with. "Focus on the mission," Victor said, checking the stunner's charge. "We clear medical, distribute sedatives station-wide through the air system, then retake environmental control. And if we encounter the aliens?" Victor's expression hardened. We show them the same mercy they've shown us. Armed and with Cade following shakily behind, Victor navigated through the command sector toward medical. They encountered 2 security drones en route, both of which Victor disabled with precise shots to their sensor arrays. Cade watched with grudging respect. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "Mars campaign, special operations." Cade nodded slowly. The file mentions special ops, but not which division. "There's a lot the file doesn't mention." Victor paused at an intersection, checking both corridors before proceeding. "Let's keep it that way." As they approached medical, the effects of the toxin became more pronounced in the personnel they encountered. Some had begun to attack each other, convinced their colleagues were enemies or monsters. Victor and Cade were forced to stun 2 engineers who charged them with improvised weapons, their eyes wild with delusion. The doors to medical stood open, as Mira had warned. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Patients, strapped to beds, thrashed against their restraints, while medical equipment blared warnings. 3 medical staff lay unconscious or dead on the floor. Of the Zalavians, there was no sign. "Watch the door," Victor instructed Cade, who took up position with his back to the wall, weapon trained on the corridor. Victor moved efficiently through the medical bay, checking for survivors and searching for the central pharmaceutical dispenser. He found it in the rear of the facility, partially dismantled. The Zalavians had extracted samples of various medications, including, Victor noted with alarm, several powerful psychotropic compounds. "They're studying our neurochemistry," he muttered, "cataloging our responses to fear, testing which medications counteract their toxin." Despite the damage, the dispenser was still functional. Victor accessed the control panel and began programming a station-wide sedative distribution through the air filtration system. The dose would be mild, enough to take the edge off the terror without rendering the entire population unconscious. As he worked, Cade's voice called out sharply from the entrance. "Movement in the corridor. Multiple contacts." Victor completed the program with a final keystroke, then moved swiftly back to Cade's position. Through the doorway, he could see a group of Zalavians approaching, 4 of them, moving with the deliberate grace of their species. They wore environmental suits that covered their insectoid features, presumably to protect them from their own toxin. "They haven't seen us yet," Victor whispered. "Hold position." The aliens paused outside another laboratory across the corridor. One operated a device that overrode the security lock, allowing them access. As the door slid open, Victor caught a glimpse of what lay inside. Rows of clear containment units, each holding a sedated human. "What the hell are they doing?" Cade hissed. "Specimen collection," Victor replied grimly. "They're taking samples for further study." Cade raised his weapon. "We have to stop them." Victor placed a restraining hand on Cade's arm. "Not yet. We're outnumbered, and we don't know their capabilities. We need to stick to the plan. Environmental control first. Once we've cleared the air, we can handle the Zalavians." Cade hesitated, then lowered his weapon. "Fine. But those are our people in there. And we'll get them back," Victor promised. "But not by getting ourselves killed or captured." They waited until the Zalavians had entered the laboratory, then slipped from medical and continued toward environmental control. The sedative Victor had programmed would begin dispersing soon, which should reduce the chaos throughout the station, but wouldn't affect the Zalavians in their protective gear. The route to environmental control took them through the science sector, which had been largely abandoned during the attack. Research materials lay scattered where they'd been dropped by fleeing personnel. In one laboratory, a containment field had failed, releasing a harmless but brilliantly colored gas that filled the room with swirling azure patterns. Victor paused, studying the gas thoughtfully. "We could use this." "Use what?" Cade asked, his voice still tense with the effort of fighting the toxin's effects. "If the Zalavians are protected by their suits, we need to find a way to penetrate that defense." Victor entered the lab and quickly located the source of the colored gas, a pressurized canister used for atmospheric experiments. This won't harm them, but it will reveal their positions if they're using any kind of optical camouflage, and it might confuse their sensors. He disconnected the canister and secured it to his belt. As an afterthought, he grabbed a second canister labeled non-reactive particulate suspension, high density. Not harmful, but potentially useful for creating visual cover. They continued through the science sector, encountering fewer personnel as they moved deeper into the station's operational areas. Those they did find were beginning to show the effects of the sedative, still afraid, but less violent, more responsive to instruction. Victor directed them toward secure areas when possible. As they neared environmental control, Cade suddenly stumbled, his weapon clattering to the floor. He pressed his palms against his temples, a low moan escaping him. "It's getting worse," he gasped. "The sedative, why isn't it working on me?" Victor knelt beside him. Different people metabolize drugs at different rates, and the fear toxin might be evolving in the air system, becoming more potent. He retrieved Cade's weapon and handed it back to him. "We're almost there. Can you continue?" Cade nodded, though his eyes continued to dart nervously to shadows that weren't there. "Just tell me if I start shooting at things that aren't real." "Deal!" They approached environmental control through a maintenance corridor that bypassed the main entrance. According to station schematics, there should be a secondary access point designed for emergency repairs. Victor located the panel and carefully removed it, revealing a narrow crawlspace beyond. "I'll go first," he whispered to Cade. "Follow only when I signal. If something happens to me, fall back to medical and barricade yourself in." "That's not the plan," Cade protested weakly. "Plans change," Victor replied, then slipped into the crawlspace. The passage was tight, designed for maintenance drones rather than humans. Victor moved silently, his breathing controlled. Ahead, he could hear voices, the distinctive clicking speech of the Zalavians, punctuated occasionally by words in heavily accented standard. Human responses exceed projections. Neurological elasticity impressive under duress. Agreed. Sample group demonstrates remarkable variation. Some expire quickly. Others develop resistance. Third phase testing approved. Victor's blood ran cold. Third phase testing. Whatever they had released into the station so far was apparently just the beginning. He reached the end of the crawlspace, which opened into a maintenance closet within environmental control. Through a ventilation grate, he could see into the main control room. 6 Zalavians moved between workstations, their environmental suits gleaming under the emergency lighting. At the central console stood a larger Zalavian, with distinctive markings on its suit. A leader, presumably. Victor took stock of the situation. The aliens were armed with what appeared to be non-lethal weapons. Perhaps they wanted their test subjects alive. The environmental controls had been modified with Zalavian technology, likely to facilitate the distribution of their toxin. And on a side monitor, Victor could see camera feeds from throughout the station, showing the continuing effects of the fear gas on Haven's personnel. He retreated slightly and activated his Riscom on a secure channel. "Cade, I have visual on 6 targets. They're preparing another wave of the toxin. I'm going to create a diversion. When they respond, enter from the main doorway and target the console on the far wall. It's controlling their distribution system." "Copy," Cade replied, his voice steadier than before. "Diversion in 3 minutes. I'm in position." Victor detached the colored gas canister from his belt and modified its release valve to create a rapid dispersal. Then he set it in the corner of the maintenance closet, aimed toward the control room, and activated it with a timer. Blue gas began hissing into the room. Simultaneously, he sent a command from his wrist unit to the station's fire suppression system, triggering alarms in adjacent sectors. The combination of alarms and the unexplained colored gas spreading across the floor had the desired effect. 3 of the Zalavians moved toward the maintenance closet to investigate, while 2 others checked the monitoring systems for the source of the alarms. Victor pressed himself against the wall beside the door. When it slid open and the first Zalavian entered, he struck with precision. His stunner pressed directly against the alien's environmental suit at the junction where its limb connected, discharged at maximum setting. The Zalavian convulsed and collapsed. The second alien reacted quickly, raising its weapon, but Victor had already rolled forward, coming up under its guard. His combat blade, standard issue for maintenance work but deadly in trained hands, found the seam in the alien's suit at the throat. A twist, a hiss of escaping atmosphere, and the alien staggered back, making high-pitched sounds of distress. The third Zalavian had more distance and fired its weapon. Victor felt a stinging impact on his shoulder as some kind of dart penetrated his uniform. Immediately, his vision blurred. Another toxin, stronger than what had been released into the station. His implant clicked rapidly, filtering his bloodstream, but the effect was immediate and disorienting. Victor forced himself to focus. The room tilted sickeningly around him as he raised his stunner and fired, missing the third Zalavian but hitting the control panel behind it. Sparks flew, and emergency lighting switched to red. That was when Cade burst through the main entrance, firing with surprising accuracy for someone fighting the effects of the fear toxin. His first shot took down a fourth Zalavian. His second missed the fifth, but destroyed a monitor bank in a shower of sparks. The leader and the remaining subordinate took cover behind the central console. Victor, fighting the effects of whatever they had shot him with, released the second canister. The particulate suspension, dense, cloudy material filled the room, reducing visibility to near zero. In the confusion, Victor activated his toolbelt's electromagnetic pulse generator, a maintenance tool for resetting stubborn electronic systems. At close range, it might disrupt the Zalavians' environmental suits or weapons. He heard the distinctive crackle of systems failing, followed by alarmed clicking speech, moving by memory and instinct through the cloud. Victor located the central environmental console. His fingers, trained by countless repair operations, found the correct command sequence even as his vision swam and doubled. A series of rapid keystrokes, an override code, and Victor reversed the station's air circulation. Instead of distributing more toxin outward from environmental control, the system would now pull air inward, concentrating any airborne agents within this room, where the Zalavians would receive a concentrated dose of their own weapon. "Cade," he shouted, "fall back, now!" Through the thinning particulate cloud, he saw Cade retreating toward the door. The lieutenant paused, realizing what Victor had done. "What about you?" Cade called. "I'll be right behind you. Go!" As Cade disappeared through the doorway, Victor moved to follow, then felt something wrap around his ankle. He looked down to see a metallic tether extending from the Zalavian leader's position. The alien rose from behind the console, its suit's external speakers activating with a burst of static. "Fascinating specimen," the Zalavian's voice rasped in accented standard. "You resist our primary agent. How?" Victor didn't answer. Instead, he drove his blade down into the tether mechanism, severing it. But he had hesitated too long. The fifth Zalavian circled behind him, pressing some kind of device against his neck. Pain lanced through him, and his muscles locked temporarily. The leader approached, studying Victor through its suit's faceplate. Up close, the alien's compound eyes reflected the red emergency lighting in dozens of tiny crimson pinpoints. "Your neurochemistry is anomalous," the leader continued. "We detected cybernetic enhancement but expected interface rejection under fear stimulus. Instead, you show adaptation. You will provide valuable data." Victor felt the air growing heavier as his programming took effect, the ventilation system pulling more and more of the station's contaminated air into this room, concentrating it. Already, the two Zalavians were beginning to move more erratically, their environmental suits unable to completely filter the intensifying toxin. "You made one mistake," Victor said, his voice rough with effort as he fought the paralytic effect. "You assumed fear would incapacitate us." The leader tilted its head. "Fear is the universal constant. All sentient species evolved with fear response. It ensures survival." "True," Victor agreed. "But humans have something else. Something you didn't account for." The Zalavian waited expectantly as Victor struggled to his feet, the paralytic beginning to wear off. "When we're afraid for ourselves, we're vulnerable," Victor continued. "But when we're afraid for others," he nodded toward the monitors, showing Haven's suffering personnel, "fear becomes rage." The ventilation system whined as it reached maximum capacity. The concentrated toxin was now visible as a faint haze in the air, growing denser by the second. The fifth Zalavian began making distressed sounds, its limbs twitching uncontrollably, despite the protection of its suit. "Your suits can't handle this concentration," Victor said. "You designed the toxin to be diluted throughout the station. This is at least 50 times that dosage." The leader's composure faltered for the first time. "You will kill your own people with these levels." Victor shook his head. "Environmental control is now sealed from the rest of the station's ventilation. This room only. Just us." As if to punctuate his point, the heavy emergency bulkheads began descending around environmental control's perimeter, the station's automated systems responding to the detected contamination by isolating the source. The leader reached for its weapon, but its movements were becoming jerky, uncoordinated. "What are you?" it demanded. Victor stepped closer, ignoring the weapon now aimed unsteadily at his chest. "I'm what happens when you push humans too far. We don't just feel fear, we weaponize it." The fifth Zalavian collapsed, its suit systems failing under the assault of the concentrated toxin. The leader remained standing through what appeared to be sheer force of will, though its limbs had begun to twitch and spasm. "You cannot survive this concentration either," the leader managed. Victor smiled grimly. "Probably not, but I've survived worse." With a final effort, he lunged forward and tore the leader's weapon away, then used it to smash the alien's faceplate. The translucent material cracked, but didn't shatter completely. Still, it was enough. The concentrated toxin began seeping through the fractures. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Zalavian leader reeled backward, its limbs flailing in what Victor recognized as the universal response to absolute terror. A high-pitched keening escaped its suit's speakers as it collapsed to the floor, curling in on itself protectively. Victor staggered to the environmental console, fighting against both the toxin and the aftereffects of the paralytic agent. His vision narrowed to a tunnel, his breathing becoming labored as his implants struggled to filter the overwhelming concentration of chemicals. With the last of his strength, he activated the station's emergency broadcast system. His voice, rough but determined, echoed throughout Haven Station. "This is Victor Reyes. The Zalavian delegation has attacked us with a neurological weapon. They've been neutralized. Medical protocols are being implemented station-wide. Remain in secure locations. Help is coming." He paused, drawing a ragged breath before adding, "And to our Zalavian friends, you just proved we won't bend." As consciousness began to fade, Victor initiated the final sequence, emergency venting of environmental control's atmosphere to space. The toxin would be purged, though at the cost of any unprotected life in the room. He grabbed an emergency breathing apparatus from the wall and activated it just as the warning klaxons began to sound. The last thing he saw before the room's atmosphere explosively decompressed was the Zalavian leader, still trapped in its private hell, reaching out with trembling limbs toward a rescue that wouldn't come. Victor awoke in medical 3 days later. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. His chest ached where his implant had worked overtime to keep him alive, and an IV dripped clear fluid into his arm. "Welcome back," a familiar voice said. Victor turned his head to see Mira sitting beside his bed, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She looked better than the last time he'd seen her, though shadows still lingered under her eyes. "The station?" he asked, his voice a dry rasp. "Recovering," she replied, offering him a sip of water. "We lost 17 people. Heart failure, self-inflicted injuries, respiratory collapse. It would have been the entire population if you hadn't stopped them." Victor absorbed this. 17 too many, but far fewer than it might have been. "The Zalavians? 6 dead in environmental control. 4 more detained when their ship attempted to leave. They're being held pending the arrival of Sector Command." Victor nodded slowly. "And the toxin?" "Neutralized throughout most of the station. We're still decontaminating some areas, but it's no longer airborne." Mira hesitated. "We've synthesized an antidote based on analysis of your blood work. Your implant. It didn't just filter the toxin. It produced antibodies. It's remarkable technology." "Military prototype," Victor said simply. "Never made it to general deployment." "Well, it saved your life. And possibly all of us." She made a note on her tablet. "You'll need to remain under observation for another day or 2. The concentrated dose you received caused some neural inflammation, but we're treating it." Victor started to sit up, then winced as pain lanced through his chest. "I should check the air scrubbers. If any trace of the toxin remains in the filtration system." "Cade's handling it," Mira interrupted, gently pressing him back onto the bed. "He's been working non-stop since you were brought in. I think he feels he has something to prove." "He performed well under pressure," Victor acknowledged. "Better than his files suggested he would." A ghost of a smile crossed Mira's face. "People often exceed their files, don't they?" The comment hung in the air between them. An acknowledgement of Victor's own history, both what was recorded and what remained unwritten. Before he could respond, the door slid open, and Lieutenant Cade entered. The young officer looked different, steadier, more confident, though similarly exhausted. "Dr. Solis." He nodded to Mira, then turned to Victor. "Reyes. Good to see you conscious." "Lieutenant," Victor acknowledged. "I hear you've been busy." "Just following the example that was set," Cade replied, with newfound respect in his voice. "Sector Command will arrive within 36 hours. They're bringing a containment team for the Zalavian prisoners and a full medical unit." "Any word on why?" Victor asked. "Why they targeted us specifically?" Cade glanced at Mira, who nodded slightly. "We found research data in their ship. Haven wasn't their first target, just their most ambitious. They've been conducting smaller-scale experiments on remote outposts for months, cataloging fear responses across different human subpopulations. Preparing for something larger," Victor concluded. "That's our assessment," Cade agreed. "Intelligence suggests they were developing a species-wide control mechanism, a way to pacify humanity through fear." Victor thought of the Zalavian leader's words. "Fear is the universal constant." "They fundamentally misunderstood us." "Yes," Mira said quietly. "They assumed fear would only weaken us. They never considered it might also strengthen us." She squeezed Victor's hand briefly. "Some of us, more than others." Later, when Mira had been called away to attend to other patients, and Cade had returned to his duties, Victor stood at the viewport in his medical room, looking out at the stars. Haven Station continued its silent orbit around a nameless gas giant, its lights now burning steadily again as systems were restored and its people recovered. He pressed a hand to his chest where the implant hummed softly, filtering his blood, keeping him alive. The military doctors who had installed it had told him it was experimental, unstable, a desperate measure for a desperate situation. They never imagined it would one day save an entire station. The irony wasn't lost on Victor. The same trauma that had haunted him for years The incident on Europa that had ended his military career and sent him to this remote outpost had ultimately given him the tools to save it. His scars had become his strength. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Victor activated the room's console to find Station Director Reisner on the screen, his eyes now covered with regenerative bandages. "Reyes," the director's voice was solemn. "I wanted to personally convey my gratitude. Dr. Solis tells me your actions saved the station." "Just doing my job, sir," Victor replied automatically. "No," Reisner shook his head slowly. "Your job is maintaining air scrubbers and fixing coolant leaks. What you did went far beyond that." He paused. "Sector Command has requested a full debrief when they arrive. They're particularly interested in how you remained functional while exposed to the toxin." Victor tensed slightly. "My military implant provided some protection. So I understand. A remarkable piece of technology." Reisner's tone became careful, measured. "There will be questions about your service record. Reyes, about Europa." The familiar weight of that memory pressed down on Victor. The mission gone wrong. The decisions made in moments of crisis. The aftermath that had seen him quietly transferred to civilian service on the frontier. "I'll answer what I can," he said finally. "Good." Reisner seemed satisfied. "And when that's done, I'd like to discuss a new position for you. Head of Station Security. Cade has recommended you for the role, and, after reviewing your actions during this crisis, I'm inclined to agree." Victor stared at the screen in surprise. "Sir, my record shows a man who makes difficult choices when necessary," Reisner interrupted. "Who puts the safety of others above his own. Who keeps his head when everyone around him is losing theirs. That's exactly who I want protecting this station." After the communication ended, Victor remained at the viewport, watching the slow rotation of the gas giant below. For years, he had carried the weight of Europa like a stone in his chest, heavier than the implant that kept him breathing. He had accepted his assignment to Haven as a kind of exile, a quiet place to serve out his remaining years in the shadow of past failures. Now, standing amid the aftermath of an attack that should have destroyed them all, Victor felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time: purpose. The Zalavians had sought to exploit humanity's fears, but had instead revealed its resilience. They had tried to break Haven Station through terror, but had only forged its people into something stronger. And Victor, the man who should have been most vulnerable to their weapon, had proven the most resistant, not because he didn't feel fear, but because he had learned to carry it differently, to transform it into resolve. As the station's systems hummed back to life around him, and its people began the slow process of recovery, Victor made a silent promise to the 17 who hadn't survived. Their sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. And if the Zalavians or anyone else came looking to exploit human fear again, they would find something far more dangerous waiting for them. Humans who had learned to turn fear into defiance. In the days that followed, as Sector Command arrived and formal investigations began, Victor found himself at the center of attention he had spent years avoiding. Officials from 3 different security agencies interviewed him about the attack, particularly his immunity to the fear toxin. Military scientists examined his implant, marveling at how it had adapted to the chemical assault. "We never designed it to do this," one researcher told him, reviewing the data from his medical scans. "The neural interface was supposed to be purely respiratory. Somehow, it's extended its function, creating a symbiotic relationship with your amygdala." Victor endured their tests and questions with stoic patience. What fascinated the scientists was, to him, simply survival, his body and the machine part of him working together to keep him alive, as they had since the day the implant was installed, after the shrapnel tore through his lungs on Ceres. More difficult were the questions about his actions during the crisis. How had he known to reverse the ventilation system? Why risk himself by remaining in environmental control? The official debriefings were clinical and thorough, but Victor could read between the lines. They were assessing him, not just his response to the Zalavian attack, but his potential reliability going forward. Europa hung unspoken in every conversation. The classified mission that had ended with 3 dead civilians and Victor's quiet removal from special operations. In his nightmares, he still saw their faces, still heard the garbled intelligence that had led his team to the wrong location, still felt the weight of the decisions made in moments when there had been no right answers, only degrees of wrong. "You're brooding again," Mira observed, finding him in the station's observation dome late one night. The vast, transparent ceiling revealed the spectacular rings of the gas giant below, illuminated by the distant sun. "Thinking," Victor corrected, not turning from the view. "About?" She stood beside him, her presence a quiet comfort he had grown accustomed to during his recovery. "Patterns. The Zalavians studied us, analyzed our fears, developed a weapon they thought would be perfect against humans." He gestured toward the stars. "What if they're not the only ones?" Mira considered this. "You think this was part of something larger?" Intelligence suggests isolated experiments, escalating in scale. Haven was the largest target yet, but perhaps not the last. Victor finally turned to face her. "We need to be prepared." "For what, another attack?" "For the reality that we're not as alone out here as we thought. And not everyone we meet will be friendly." Mira studied his face in the dim light. "Is that why you accepted Reisner's offer? To prepare us?" The news of Victor's promotion had spread quickly throughout the station. Some personnel had expressed surprise. Others, particularly those who had witnessed his actions during the crisis, had nodded with approval. "Partly," Victor admitted. "And partly because running away hasn't worked out well for me so far." "Is that what you think you've been doing? Running away?" Victor didn't answer immediately. The question cut too close to truths he rarely acknowledged, even to himself. "I came to Haven to disappear," he said finally. "To be forgotten. Instead, I found something worth fighting for." Mira's expression softened. "The station? Or something else?" Before Victor could respond, his wrist comm chimed with an alert. Lieutenant Cade's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Reyes, we need you in detention. One of the Zalavian prisoners is asking for you specifically. Says it has information you need to hear." Victor exchanged a look with Mira. "On my way," he responded, then added to her, "We'll continue this conversation later." The detention level had been hastily repurposed from a cargo hold after the attack. The 4 surviving Zalavians were being held in separate containment fields, monitored by both Haven security and Sector Command personnel. Victor found Cade waiting outside the makeshift brig, his expression troubled. "Which one asked for me?" Victor inquired. "The Navigator," Cade replied. "Lowest rank of the survivors. It's been cooperating with interrogators more than the others, but until now refused to discuss the purpose of the attack." Victor nodded. "Let's hear what it has to say." The Zalavian sat cross-legged in the center of its containment field, its insectoid features impassive. Without its environmental suit, it appeared smaller, more vulnerable, its exoskeleton a dull amber in the harsh lighting. When Victor entered, its compound eyes tracked his movement with unsettling precision. "You requested to speak with me," Victor stated, remaining at a safe distance from the field. The alien's mandibles clicked softly before it spoke in accented standard. "You are the anomaly, the one who redirected our compound." "I'm the one who stopped your attack," Victor corrected. "Why did you ask for me?" The Zalavian's head tilted slightly. "To warn you. What happened here was merely preparation, a test of effectiveness." Victor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the detention level's temperature. "Preparation for what?" "The Great Cleansing," the alien replied, the term carrying reverent weight in its voice. Zalavia has determined that human expansion threatens the balance of power in this sector. Your emotional volatility makes you unpredictable, dangerous. So you developed a weapon to target that volatility, Victor concluded. To paralyze us with fear. To save you from yourselves, the Zalavian corrected. Fear is clarity. Fear is control. Those who master fear master all. And yet your fear gas failed, Victor pointed out. Your experiment produced results you didn't expect. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound Victor had come to recognize as Zalavian agitation. Isolated anomalies. Statistical irrelevance. The formula has been refined based on data collected here. The next deployment will be more comprehensive. Victor stepped closer to the containment field, studying the alien carefully. Why tell me this? Why warn us? For a moment, the Zalavian was silent, its compound eyes reflecting Victor's image in dozens of tiny facets. When it spoke again, its voice had changed, carrying an emotion Victor couldn't quite identify. Because you showed me something new, in environmental control, when the concentrated compound affected me despite my protections, I experienced clarity. I saw the error in our approach. What error? We assumed fear would make humans easier to control. Instead, it made you more dangerous. The alien's limbs shifted in what might have been discomfort. My superiors refused to accept this finding. They proceed with the larger plan, believing the formula's failure was localized to this station. Victor processed this information, his mind racing through implications. When? He demanded. When is this great cleansing scheduled to begin? The first phase has already begun, the Zalavian replied. Deployment vessels were dispatched to 3 human colonial hubs before we arrived at Haven. They carry atmospheric dispersal units, similar to what we tested here, but larger, more potent. Cade, who had been listening silently, stepped forward. We need to alert Sector Command immediately. If colonial hubs are targeted, millions could be affected. Victor finished, already turning toward the exit. He paused, looking back at the Zalavian. Why risk telling us this? You're betraying your own people. The alien's mandibles moved in what might have been the equivalent of a bitter smile. The compound changed me as well. I have seen what fear truly is, not a tool of control, but a crucible. Those who emerge from it are not weakened, but transformed. It raised a limb toward Victor. As you were. As Victor and Cade rushed to alert Sector Command, the Zalavian's words echoed in Victor's mind. The compound changed me as well. He wondered how many others, human and alien alike, would be transformed by the crucible to come. The response from Sector Command was immediate and comprehensive. Alert protocols were activated across human space, defense fleets mobilized toward the named colonial hubs, and a diplomatic crisis declared with the Zalavian Concordat. Within hours, Haven Station became the center of a rapidly expanding military operation as reinforcements arrived and emergency response teams established command posts throughout the habitat ring. Victor found himself suddenly elevated from station security chief to key strategic advisor, his first-hand experience with the Zalavian weapon making him invaluable to the response effort. Military scientists worked around the clock to synthesize an antidote based on the interaction between his implant and the fear toxin, while intelligence analysts debriefed the Zalavian navigator for any additional information about the planned attacks. We've identified the first target. Admiral Keene, the Sector Command representative, informed Victor during an emergency briefing. The Admiral was a compact woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Proxima Colony. Population 900,000. Our nearest response vessel is still 18 hours out. Too long, Victor said, studying the tactical display. The Zalavians could deploy their weapon before our ships arrive. Agreed, the Admiral nodded grimly. Which is why we're sending you. Victor looked up sharply. Me? You, Dr. Solis, and a science team. You'll take our fastest courier vessel. It can reach Proxima in under 10 hours. Your mission is to prepare their medical facilities for potential contamination and oversee deployment of the antidote prototype. With respect, Admiral, I'm an engineer, not a tactical operative. The Admiral's expression remained impassive. Your file suggests otherwise. Reyes, your experience on Europa is classified, Victor interrupted. Not to me. The Admiral held his gaze. We need someone who understands both the weapon and how to counter it. Someone who's demonstrated they can function under its influence. That's you. Victor wanted to refuse. Haven Station was just beginning to recover. His new security protocols were still being implemented. And yet, if the Zalavian navigator was correct, millions of lives hung in the balance. When do we leave? He asked finally. Immediately. Dr. Solis is already preparing the necessary equipment. As Victor left to gather his gear, Lieutenant Cade fell into step beside him in the corridor. I hear you're shipping out, the younger man said. Looks that way, Victor confirmed. You'll be acting security chief until I return. Cade nodded, his expression serious. I'll keep things running here, but... He hesitated. The Zalavian. The one that warned us. It was found dead in its cell an hour ago. Victor stopped walking. How? Unknown toxin. Must have been a hidden implant or something similar. The other prisoners are being examined now, but initial theory is suicide, or execution triggered remotely for its betrayal. The implication was clear. Whatever the navigator had revealed, the Zalavians considered it significant enough to warrant silencing their own. Be vigilant, Victor warned. We may have stopped their experiment here, but Haven could still be a target for retaliation. Understood. Cade extended his hand. Good luck out there. Reyes. Victor took it, feeling the shift in their relationship, from suspicion to mutual respect. Take care of our people, Lieutenant. The courier vessel was sleek and military, designed for speed rather than comfort. In the cramped preparation bay, Victor found Mira overseeing the loading of medical supplies, her movements efficient despite the obvious fatigue lining her face. I hear we're partners on this mission, he said, securing his own equipment in a storage locker. Mira glanced up, a tight smile crossing her features. Apparently your implant and my neurochemical expertise make us the ideal team. The Admiral can be persuasive. That's one word for it, Victor agreed. Are you sure you're up for this? You're still recovering yourself. I could ask you the same question, she countered, her eyes flicking to where his hand unconsciously rested over his implant. The concentrated dose you received caused inflammation. Your doctors still don't fully understand. I'm functional. Functional isn't the same as well, Victor. Before he could respond, the ship's captain announced final boarding. As they strapped themselves into acceleration couches for departure, Victor found himself studying Mira's profile in the dim lighting. She had been through as much trauma as anyone on Haven. Yet here she was, volunteering for another potential confrontation with the weapon that had nearly broken her. Why did you agree to this mission? He asked quietly, as the engines began their preliminary sequence. Mira was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the medical case secured at her feet. The same reason you did, she answered finally. Because no one else should have to experience what we went through, what we're still going through. The ship detached from Haven with a barely perceptible shudder, then accelerated rapidly away from the station. Through a small viewport, Victor watched the lights of Haven recede until they were indistinguishable from the surrounding stars. Somewhere ahead lay Proxima Colony, potentially unaware of the threat bearing down upon them. And beyond that, a confrontation with the architects of the Great Cleansing, a reckoning born from fear but forged in defiance. As the courier ship entered FTL transit, Victor closed his eyes, feeling the familiar hum of his implant synchronizing with his breathing. The Zalavians had tried to use fear gas on the humans of Haven Station. They had unleashed terror as a weapon, expecting submission. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous. Humans, who had stared into the abyss of their own fears and emerged transformed. Not weakened, but strengthened. Not controlled, but liberated. And as the ship carried them toward whatever awaited at Proxima Colony, Victor found himself oddly at peace with the uncertainty ahead. The Zalavians had failed to understand a fundamental truth about humanity, one he had learned through pain and loss, through Europa and Haven and everything in between. True courage isn't the absence of fear, but the mastery of it, and in that mastery lies not just survival, but triumph.